everybody, and welcome to Kissing the Cod, all things gold. Happy to have you back here today and happy to welcome Gary Lewis. As we've mentioned before, the gold exploration business is a very interesting world. It's tough and fiercely independent and populated by highly intelligent and very unique characters. And I think, Gary, you qualify for that list.
Unique
Gary,
for sure.
Gary is joining us today. He's in Newfoundland. And welcome, Gary. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Now, for the benefit of everybody, you are a prospector and involved in a number of different commodities. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and and where you are right now?
Okay, I'm located in CBS in Newfoundland. I'm originally from Grand Falls, Windsor, central Newfoundland, but my family is, I guess, my mother's side of the family, the Philpott side, are from Bay Verte and from Coachman's Cove, and that's sort of how I got interested in the mining business. Is we'd always take summer holidays, and go out around Bay Verte in the summer, and of course that place is steeped in a mining history, and it was very active in the late '60s with the copper mines at Rambler and the Ming mine, and also the asbestos mine that is in the Advocate mine, which is on the way between Bay Verte and Coachman's Cove. So I got, that's really, I guess, as a kid going back and forth, that's where the interest came from for me to be, interested in minerals and exploration.
And growing up in Newfoundland, I've had the benefit of living in a mining town in northern Canada that was mostly populated by people from Newfoundland. It absolutely fabulous people. Couldn't say enough nice things about them. So there you are, surrounded by everybody.
Yeah, it was. I must say, it was. The town I grew up in, former Grand Falls, now Grand Falls, Windsor. It was also a resource town. It was a paper town, and so we lived resources of the land, while the Outport part of Newfoundland lived on most of the resources of fishing and related industries, and of course Bay Verte area was and still is a mining district and probably the mining capital within the Newfoundland part of the island. Obviously Labrador has got monster mines in iron ore at the world scale. The Labrador is not something that should be left out in any conversation. But in Newfoundland itself, you had the Labrador, you had Bay Verte, and also Buckens for the base metal production historically. So yeah.
And Newfoundland, and I always, it's the jurisdiction province of Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm going to shorten it down to Newfoundland just for our conversation. It's going through a modern day gold rush and getting a lot of attention. But you were there long before the gold rush, and you have quite an active involvement in all of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, what happened, I guess, I always dabbled in it, and I knew, I guess, like anyone starting off, a little bit about it. So when Boise Bay came and went, and I wasn't ready for it, I just said, well, that's not going to happen to me twice. So in '96, I did the prospecting course, which is something that the province and the government put off, which, government is excellent in how they promote prospectors, how they develop prospectors, and they were really ahead of a lot of the other provinces. So I was the benefit of that. I was, and also at the time, you're somewhat freshly out of school. So now I'm just an old fart, but then you're using, techniques and approaches to exploration that people weren't using for the most part. The government was very much developing that in their data set. And so I was a person that, looked at things differently than traditional prospecting. I looked at the data and the information and the previous work. So because of that, I focused on different approaches to exploration and in different environments, but there got to be some common denominators and what were good indicator minerals for both gold and base metal on the island, and that's sort of how I focused my exploration, and I guess in the beginning, mostly miss. You know a little bit. You think you see what you think you see something of interest, but you start off more like a crow looking for something shiny, to try to run an assay on with the hope of getting a good result. And I remember where I got my first really good assay was in a property called Eastern Point, and that rock ran 44 grams of gold. So I had a lot of duds in the bag before that, but that just gets you hooked even more. So yeah.
So I know that you're a technical advisor with a number of companies that are now exploring actively across the island, but I want to go and talk a little bit about how do you become a prospector? What is a prospector? Because I think for people that aren't that familiar with it, you've got this image of somebody with a rock hammer heading out into the field, but it's a highly technical world now, and lots of tools. But how did you start? How do you begin this career?
Well, I guess it starts off first with being in a vast piece of geology and not having a lot of direction until you start training yourself and educating yourself, and noting your experiences. You put a lot of time in to try to filter out what becomes valid information or invalid information. I know Larry Hicks, who instructed me in our prospecting course in the 90s there, like I won't forget, he said, you got to be able to see the big picture. And he talked about alteration, and after so long punching time at this and looking at the geochem and looking at the different geological and structural features, topographic features, then you start to see the big picture. So for me, it was it's a case of you get the basic training, you keep going online and reading stuff, you read all the reports, you go to almost every presentation that companies put off, and try to listen to see what will stick. And if you're that type of person, things will stick with you, and then you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So you arm yourself with basic information on geology and then geochemistry, and then you go expose yourself some geophysics, and as you look at the map and you start to figure out the big picture, looking at the geology and topographic work with the lake sediment data, which again, the government published all these things back in the late 90s, early 2000s. To start CD-ROM, and you'd get it in an ARC, you'd publish it all on your computer, wait for it to spin up, and sort of look at it, try to sort through the different data sets, and with that, then you notice your patterns and stuff. So it's a game of self-education. Also, the BC and Yukon Chamber of Mineral Resources had a very good online prospecting school that you could go through, and it's, I don't know how long ago the smartphone came out. It might be 13 years ago now, or 14. Time's going too quick. But just to think, at one time, I remember in the early 70s, home, we got the Encyclopedia Britannica. We thought we had the world in a little niche in the closet, and now I'm sitting next to me with two iPhones that have the equivalent of the World Congress, basically, sitting on top of the desk here. So all the information you need. And so, at that point, then somewhere along the line, you got to learn what your strengths and your weaknesses are and what your time availability is. So how do you execute? You start to see things, you formulate ideas, you try to see where the market is going, where the world markets and where commodities are going to go, because you want to be ahead of the curve. And in this business, it's very cyclical. You get things going up and down. So the different commodities would, be in and out of folk. And it's done that a couple of times. But what's important to know in Newfoundland, of course, is not until Hope Brook happened, in the early 80s, and then was in production in mid 80s when I was, really got interested in this, that, gold was an unknown sort in Newfoundland. It was not something that you would really look at to develop a viable, deposit of gold. So it was mostly base metals at that time. And also, the Reed Lots and the A&D Company, and through their subsidiaries like BP, BHP, or Noranda, they controlled most of the mineral assets. as well as Bowaters and Corner Brook. They would have controlled all that Gander area for mineral resources. And one of my jobs was development patrol officer. We patrolled the Gander River. I used to have the luxury of leaving Gander Bay and go right to Appleton in the canoe several times a summer, a few times in a helicopter during the season, and also snowmobile. So it was something that I had access to, by consequence. And when the government of Newfoundland helped furnish some of Bowater's debt, they acquired different assets, including mineral rights, in exchange for money for the contribution towards the forestry continuation. So a lot of the island was restricted, because of different property holders and different conditions. And so it didn't really open up until 2000s for gold exploration. So up to that point, it's all,
base metals and
yeah.
I think a lot of people don't really understand that the value of the Prospector and the whole discovery and exploration leading to a mine stage. Because really these public companies come in and we're all involved with them, but they need your knowledge and your properties. And this is how you generate your living, is you go out, find what you think is something good and pitch it to them. Am I correct?
You're correct. And again, that's something that I guess I excelled in somewhat is, I do have the gift of gab and for the good or the bad of it. But, so I had a foot or two to go look into the companies and presenting it in the way I knew how. For some people looking at it, it might have been pretty butchered, my point of view of what was geology and what was happening. But in most cases, I could strike a chord with somebody in terms of pointing the opportunity. And as I became more knowledgeable, of course, you're way more able to, approach somebody like a BP or somebody and say, look, we have a property, here's the potential of it. And so I remember at one point in time, just give an example, that Hud Bay came here and looked at the entire island for base metals. And I tried to get a hold of them so they'd come look at a property we called the Katy property, which is named after my daughter, found now some 22 years ago. I did get a hold of them. I said, you got to come have a look at this. And I convinced them they're going to go from Gander and fly out the next day. And it was snowing and stuff, but the ground was bare. But once they went in and looked at it, they said, I thought you said there was some alteration here. Like, this is the best property we saw in all Newfoundland. So, that property still to this day is not developed and not explored properly. Now it's held by exploits now, and hopefully they'll get an opportunity to explore it. There's going to be hopefully some more research come out on that property and current research to really show the complexity of that property. And and the thing is, when you really study these maps, I remember the first time I had, you have eureka moments, right? Where you're looking at something and something happens and the hair stands up in the back of your neck. And that's a property that's happened to me on, and it was subsequent to other properties. But, what you'll see down there is the tremendous folding, when you look at the Great Bend, and then when you come off of Kyle Lake and everything down there, all the brooks run from the northwest and they run to the southeast, and then they abruptly all run back to the northeast. So the entire thing is folded. And that's, I think, what will come out now soon in terms of the government data. And I know originally the Prospector, good prospector, unfortunately passed away. Cyril Reed and I were in there originally, doing the work in there. And, we found some rock in there that ran like 40+% zinc, combined metals over 50%. And one of the things we did find was a fold nose in on the side of the road that measured about 2 feet on each limb, and with felsic volcanics, and in the middle was a sandwich of massive sulfides. So, it's going to be interesting to see, what becomes of that now. And here goes 22 years, Wow. So you got to be patient, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the other thing I'll say too is just in all that, Janet, is that, a prospector got to know his pluses and his minuses, and in this business, there are people out there that with a lot more history than me at this, and I got to tip it off to, like say the Keatses, for instance, and Al Keats and their family and all the Keats family and associated Keatses, right? Those fellows were at this long for everybody else, and they found many mineral deposits that are, again, some of them now have been mined and other ones are still sitting there, So we all hope to make our mark. For me personally, I'll come back to this after, but, we found a rare district in Labrador that, it's going to come into its vogue now, and it's really truly something of immense value. And like in 2005, I'll just go on to that now, since I brought it up. But
yeah, go for it.
In 2005, Ray Saunders and I, who's also passed away, God love him, he believed in me. I was doing some work for him, installing in-floor heating in his house, actually, and he took the opportunity and the chance to invest. So we started a company called Altera. Now, it originally got on the go for a possible nickel discovery in Labrador. And, so we acquired and staked a lot of ground. And at the same time, though, I had been prospecting for rare earths, and also my wife, Donna. So we had land on the Labrador-Quebec border, Strange Lake. We're the only other people that owned a part of Strange Lake. Unfortunately, part of it got dropped. Same day got dropped, the government into exempt mineral lands. That's happened to me a couple of times. Another time up north for diamonds, but so you're trying to promote these things. So we also had a part of Red Wine Complex, and Aubrey Budgell and Brian Penny, the fellows that are co-founders of the Port Hope project. They're in the area looking for copper and nickel. Again, because of the past data from Boise Bay and stuff. But Brian had a lot of experience at uranium. And so I was telling Aubrey, I said, look, Charlie Gower has done a lot of work up in this area for uranium and for other minerals. And, you should be looking for uranium up there. And it wasn't a week later that Aubrey called me up and said, okay, we're getting all these readings for uranium. I said, okay, so what are you getting? And he told me the numbers. And he said, what do you think of that? I said, well, I got no scale of reference. I don't really know what that represents, so. But, no hesitation by Aubrey. He went out and spent $12,000 on a super cint. And, they were doing readings for uranium. And as we're working away at the uranium up there, we came across, an understanding of the geology and what was causing it. And so then we continued to explore for that. So we looked at it all and started to see a pattern, and we were getting, counts like of 57,000 counts on the cint. And so I said, oh, this is related to the transcurrent fault. I could put it together. So I said to Aubrey and Brian, I said, go up. I said, from the Charlottetown towards Goose Bay, these are the UTM coordinates. We go up there and you cross that area, get out and see what will happen. And sure enough, that's a 76-kilometer buckshot. Wow. And they went there and bang, there it was. So then we knew basically what we're into. And Aubrey is a resourceful person. He's a successful business person. He's actually been inducted in Newfoundland and Labrador Business Person Hall of Fame. And so he had access to his own plane, and pilot. So, of course, he said, what do you want to do? I said, well, check out a couple more places, but get the plane. Let's go up and put the cint on the floor of the plane. So that's what we did. And we started to fly back and forth across that in a pattern. And we actually mapped it and took readings, along that and over several of the claims. And we proved out that, okay, this is wild. This is a big uranium play. And so we followed up with that, on point and going to different locations. Brian's a really good woods person. He can get around. So we acquired a lot of different samples through the whole area. And we encouraged then, other companies come look at it, like Cameco and Mega Uranium, Uranium One, Cornerstone, and other companies. They all came and looked at it. And while we're looking at it, it struck my interest that this was a lot like Namibia. So, and we were there with Cameco, and there was a gem sort of in one of the rocks in the road cut. And I'm trying to think of the girl's name now, but she threw the rock up and asked me what I thought of it. And that's what, sort of struck me, because it was Amazonite, But
What is
So that's
Amazon?
what Amazonite, yeah, which according to Anthony Mariano has nothing to do with the big picture up there.
Okay.
But I'd love to go up the Amazon River and see what might be up there. But and that's the way a prospector thinks, you know. So the thing is, we then took it and we sent it for assay for rare earths. And when we got that result back that day, when I put in the spreadsheet, and you can't sell all these commodities, you know, but the current trading price when you punch it in and bring the values across, the rock was worth $50,000 a cubic meter if you could actually sell all the different minerals that were in it, and ran good uranium, which is not a great thing for rare earths, you know.
Wow.
So that whole project that got to be, it's got to be something we vended into what Ray and I were doing, and we had formed a company called Altera, and then we had optioned that off a reverse takeover with a company called Search Minerals, and then I convinced Search to go into the rare earth business, and that's history now. Today they're probably got about $30 million spent up there. They got 2 deposits to find, a third one coming, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So it must feel very rewarding to see something that you take from such an early stage of discovery to seeing that type of investment and development.
Definitely. And when you bring that right back to a point you made earlier about the value of a prospector, and this government does excellent work for prospectors, and
I've heard that a lot.
Overall, probably most professional people you'll ever deal with, from every office in the mineral claims recording department, the people that have been there, to Norm Mercer and other people that have been in the information side of it, to the people in geophysics, to all aspects. And it's such a resource. And, the only thing I will say to you fail on is not to be negative and in that compliment, but not to throw a brick, is, when a prospector files his report, they can put in $100 a day for their time. Well, I don't know one prospector that gets up and says, oh, I got 7.5 hours punched, and or he gets X number of cents a kilometer for his vehicle. This is something that a person, and they may get grants, but this is a person that gets up at what hour in the morning and goes at this, and his brain is totally engaged to his own damnation, perhaps, because it gets to be a consumption.
I am married to a prospector.
Yeah.
He also has his master's in geology, but he never calls himself a geologist.
There you go.
Always calls himself as prospector. And what I learned is that it's as valuable as it is being on the land, learning how to mine data is incredibly important. And the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, from what I've seen, has an incredibly well-managed system and a lot of information from the years. So I just want to go back to uranium for so you refer to it something as a scint. You mean a scintillometer?
Yes, a scintillometer. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're running, you would run over the scintillometer. Okay.
Yeah, we just to go back to that story again. So you can picture this now. So it's Aubrey and I with the pilot, and I don't want to say anything but get his pilot in trouble and what height he should be flying at, or there are no caribou or anything in the area, but so it's pretty well safe that way. But we basically flew treetop, and it's a twin engine plane, and you're doing 145 miles an hour, and you're 200 feet off the ground, and you're mapping the geology with the scint, and you'd see numbers between 8 and 12, typically over rock that wasn't highly anomalous, and then you'd see the scint go up to 35, 45. And you grab your coordinates as best you could and get them down, and then you see the pattern, right? And sure enough, the transcurrent fault, which is it was all about the structure up here. It's a volcanic sequence of rock that all relates to the neighboring granites that Charlie Gower had mapped before. The original report I gave Brian and Aubrey to say, look, read this report and follow up on Gower's work. So again, there's a resource. Charlie Gower, God love him. I mean, I don't know quite sure what he's at today, but today he's a resource, So we mapped that then for the uranium, and then we followed up on the rare earth aspect of it. And there's other minerals up there too besides that, but it's an easy one because it's it's such an obvious thing, and based on, what the weather patterns been. If you got a good arid stretch, that you're not washing out all this uranium, you make sure you're flying at that time and you pick it up. And we've seen other things up there too that they're extremely impressive for uranium. So, we're not finished with that yet.
Yeah,
So,
I think we both share a love of nuclear energy. I just
well, I watched
way to go, right?
I watched the video the other evening, the Elon Musk, and in it, his most recent one, at the 40-minute mark, he said, and I'm pro nuclear, and this is where we will get to. Is inevitable,
Yeah.
So that will happen.
And I've heard that the government's very supportive of developing exploration in uranium as well. I call it the other yellow metal.
Yeah, definitely.
Since we're supposed to talk about gold, but it's the future, and I was very happy to see the Canadian government as well offer some good tax credits for exploration in commodities like uranium and critical metals.
Yeah.
We don't see that in the US. It's not a critical metal yet, and good for Canada, right? Good for Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'll one more point about that, and then I'll get back on track. There is
that's okay. I don't mind.
The Richard Nixon, who created the Petro Dollar and made the American dollar what it is, in a deal to protect the Saudis at the time. So everything was done in any stretch of one's imagination to paint uranium and the related minerals to be something we can't live with, something we should avoid, because you don't want anyone to have their hands on the tyranny, And then, of course, since then, total misunderstanding of, whichever one of the reactors you want to focus on, the ones in Japan, people think that there are nuclear explosions, but they weren't. Of course, they're pressure vessel explosions, just like a hot water tank blowing up. And because the technology is not the proper technique, and then the consequence of that is, the reactor is damaged, and then, you get this whole follow-up concern, So, yeah. So,
yeah, it's we're going to go back to gold now. Not because I love this, and I love talking about Labrador as well. And but before we go to gold, I just have to ask, how long do you think you'd survive in a 9-to-5 office job?
Well, I'm actually do that too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, no, for a day job, I'm in charge of the water and sewer department for the city of Mount Pearl. And, but, it's an interesting thing, there's weekends, there's evenings, there's things, and people say like, how can you do justice to that? And I said, well, there's 28 hours in a day. And they say, what do you mean there's 28 hours in a day? I said, well, do you sleep 8? Because I don't sleep 4. So, you make the time.
And weekends out on the land?
Whenever you can, yeah. And of course, now there's so much stuff for what's after happening. The writing reports and follow-up is a big chunk of time, So, and so you got to work with that in the weather, and Newfoundland is, has its moments there, but it also lends itself to exploration in the wintertime for things that you're way more difficult to get to in the summer, unless you're using a helicopter, right? Yeah. So, it's the thing. So, the whole Mount Peyton thing and the whole linear thing and the Dog Bay line, to get back on track, how I got involved in that. Originally I told you, you get, you sort of educate yourself. And one of the things I educated myself with was understanding the Point Leamington deposit, which is the largest on-mine massive sulfide deposit, I guess, in eastern Canada. And it's, 16 to 18 million tons, but more besides. And when I was lucky enough to get some original documents there from Noranda, from a young fellow from Fortune Harbor, a young fellow, Carl, who passed away. He was a geologist. So he had some of the hardcover data from Noranda, and I was given it and I studied it. And, I looked at the stats of it all. And I was good at stats in university. So when I looked at it all, it was obvious to me what worked and what didn't. And the only thing that worked in there was basal tills. And the only thing you could see seeping out of that environment there was the arsenic. So you put it together, you try to figure it out. So you learn that, the arsenic, for some reason, that it was high plateau bog. The base metal also has an arsenic signature, which is common to the gold too. And that's one of the things I really follow up on. And but the bogs and the manganese scavenging didn't control the arsenic. So the arsenic presented itself, as runoff from this high plateau bog that was sitting on top of, a large massive sulfide deposit, which Alan Keats had found, for the record, and another one of his discoveries.
Popping up everywhere.
Oh yeah, it's unreal what these guys are after doing. So, when I looked at it all, I said, okay, that was great. And then another little pattern I saw was, or the right or the wrong of it, the pine trees survived in there. And that's because the pine trees, based on the geochem of the soils, the minerals act as same as today, an antiviral. And so in Newfoundland, pine blister rust will come along and other diseases and insects and stuff and attack these trees and wipe them out. But a lot of the trees that grow to maturity is a lot because of the geochem. So the geochem gives the tree a better chance to survive and get to be, your pine forest, here in Newfoundland anyway. And I looked at that as a pattern and started to follow up on it, and it worked for me. You'll never convince me otherwise now, but it worked for me.
You get into something that I think is an important point. There's a lot of environmental groups out there that believe that exploration and mining is destructive, and they're. I don't think people realize that if you're in this business, you know the land, you love the land, you're living from the land, and you care about it, and I don't think people really understand that part of it.
No, I mean you got to break some eggs to make an omelet, just the way it is, and the other thing too for the people out there that may watch this that are more environmentally driven in their approach to things. If you took all the existing mines in Newfoundland and you were to consolidate them into a dot, and then if you look at the other land masses out there, and now when you see just willy-nilly people creating these wilderness reserves with no consequence, once it's done, like try making that go backwards. And, Quebec has it much better. They have the Plan du Nord, and they will look at the land mass and the resources and work with indigenous people, and then try to determine, okay, where should we put this? And I'll give it to you this way. If you were a farmer and you had all this beautiful topsoil over there and all this solid rock granite there, would you say, okay, I'm going to make that a national park where all the topsoil's too, and try to plant my vegetables on the solid rock? No, you wouldn't, right? So the government needs to fully understand it, and not saying they don't, but the political interests of some of these groups now is far exaggerated in what's the benefit to the public. And I'll be the first one to look at something like like a true pine mountain reserve and these types of beautiful sceneries that are unique and say, okay, that makes sense. But right now, what I see for the most part is a willy-nilly allotment of land to satisfy a group of people just because someone said we're going to get to this percentage of land, and protect it. Well, I can tell you right now that Newfoundland, for the most part, has very major road access, very little, and the most of it is a park, and Labrador also. And what they're turning into parks, you can never get there. Only the most elite people in the world can go there. It's not for you or I, and it shouldn't be. I guess it's for the environment and the ecology and the creatures of it, So yeah, they're habitants on this earth. They have their right to exist, and prospectors get that. I mean, we understand the beauty of it all, and it's not damn the torpedoes and wipe it all out. It's truly looking at what is a responsibility, and for years the government. I mean, when you for a person out there that owns a piece of land, you're nevertheless, it's in there. You don't own the mineral rights, and that's because those rights are owned by the people, and they're there for the benefit of the people. And it was responsibility of the government at the time to be aware of those things and to be of knowledge of that, and to take the true benefit of people and environment and ecology and nature. Yes, but right now I feel a lot of it is just lost on the ladder. It's not
Ideology.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I probably will sound like a broken record because I say this over and over again, but I don't think there's a better industry that can create wealth and jobs and contracts and businesses like
Yeah.
the exploration and mining. And I think what you said is really important, that those minerals are owned by the people, and you have a social responsibility to help people survive. And well, things can be very pretty to look at and necessary to protect. People have to live too. You have to eat, and managed properly, which to me, there's no, it's just, you're in the mining industry. You're not managing properly.
You're not the person that's putting
part of it, right?
You're not the person that put that car on your bum to go to work, right? So they all need that, and we all need that. And it's not so much it's they and us, but I want to sound like that. But hypocrisy sometimes is somewhat distasteful, because we all have a social responsibility and an environmental responsibility. So
and there's the mining industry does amazing things for people. I was in a mining town in 88, which dates me a lot. And the electrician at the mine was making $60 an hour in 88.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get enough of them, right? There was a void of trades. And
he didn't die with any money in his bank either. He spent it all. Right. He drove the economy. You know what I mean?
RVs and boats and
family living too, right?
Yeah, camping with the family. Like it's
all
the dollars go around in a jurisdiction when there's jobs in the jurisdiction, right?
Yeah, they're good paying jobs. They pay back. Yeah.
I'm very happy to see what's going on where you live, because I know some of the people from the north that went back there, and it's great to see the jobs there now.
Yeah. So Janet, then the other thing now, I guess, to get back to it, I alluded earlier about why I looked at the point limit deposit and the arsenic. And then the same thing was true when I looked at the other place around the island, the Mount Peyton itself. While it may not be a linear, and to me, it looks like more of a slumping feature, but, I noticed a chain of lake seds in there that ran for 14 kilometers, and the furthest one being 1010 arsenic, one in the middle, 178, and the other one being 1170. We went along that trend, and Naranda had worked Salmon River before. And, so we were working away at that. And of course, there was no gold in the lake seds whatsoever. But, we went in there, the first day that we sampled it. Again, I had Cyril Reed go in and sample it. At the time, Cyril was an eager person to prospect, and an unbelievable woodsman and a dog for work. I remember the day he went in, there was 30 degrees. My wife was about to have a child, and there's no way I can cover all this off, and so he's in there, he comes out, he says, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, that's it, for sure. That's massive arsenic." And it was float he had picked up around the side of the lakes. The next day, we were in there, and then we continued along this feature, topograph feature in the middle, the next pond up. We got lots of samples around that pond that ran up to 44 grams. Quinlan's collected that one. And the middle pond at 178, just off to the west of it, where the structural features to it, is a small gully. And we sampled right there. And I still picture poor old Cyril out in the lake, and digging down and pulling up massive arsenic off the bottom of the pond. It looked like baby poop, and we assayed that, and it ran 400 parts gold. And then we dug right on the shore. We could see going along the shore, there was some quartz there. And to this day, that stuff runs, up to 33 grams, and there's never been a trench put on it. There's never been sampled. The same thing up on the bottom of Shirley Lake. It runs the same thing, samples, up to 44 grams, never been trenched. And then the furthest pond up, the 1170, I was in there last year in a helicopter and found some beautiful samples. And that property is now owned by Truscus, and Exploits owns the bulk of it,
Because you mentioned a number of properties to different companies, correct?
I have, yeah. It's been a pretty busy couple of years,
It's great.
But when the first pass happened, though, at the time, Garfield McVeigh was with Rubicon Minerals, and he was in in on the Point Limited deposit. And, you know, I was working on the Mount Peyton and the whole idea of it. And as we went around the Mount Peyton, everything in contact with the Mount Peyton, the Mount Peyton is like a sombrero to me. And but you have the, you know, there's an alkaline intrusive, there's a mafic and more felsic phase to it. And in the margins, you know, where the valley is too, and the valley is totally peripheral around the perimeter. And as you move away from that contact, where this bigger intrusive would be underneath and fluids would have been shed along the perimeter of it or in these inner sloping features, then you get these arsenic signatures. And around the perimeter of it, we've to say we found 10 epithermal systems that were never found before, you know, beautiful textbook epithermal systems. And we still got some pretty good ideas, I think, on what will happen around the antimony mine itself. And so I sold that concept to Garfield. I mean, at the time, Altius had drilled a really good hole and sparked some interest. And I was after bringing Garfield numerous times to say, look, there's a really big picture here to be looking at. And then so they optioned it off to, I think it was Battlefield at the time. And so then, you know, Staking Rush happened that time with the Botwood Basin concept. And I still remember Garfield McVeigh going to Vancouver and presenting his talk there at the time when all this stuff was happening. And he got about maybe a minute into it. And he said, I got to stop. He said, we think we're exploring in Newfoundland goes Altius and their option agreement, you know? And he said, that's not why we're here. We're here because of, at the time, black bart prospecting, you know? That's what we were. And he said, they pointed this out to us so he was one of the first fellows to give us some recognition for what we did. And again, that's a long while ago. And that really started, that boom then is what started the modern day understanding of the Appleton linear and the further understanding, I guess, because I don't want to take any away from Peter Nimmel and Pizzas and you know, the other people. I'm going to try to think of some names in a minute, but the people that were there before, you know, and so they were at it and nailing away at it. So, but the money and funding came because of that effort. And Rubicon and Paragon, you know, they really had a lot of property. And it's like everything, you know, it's like a balloon that blows up too much. You know, you got to have some good sources or else it'll bust, right?
And it started and then it pulled back. But I want to go to something that you said earlier. You talked about the reed lots, and I don't think people understand how important that piece of history is in terms of opening up exploration. Because people keep saying they can't believe there's a modern day gold rush. If this was so great, it would have happened before. But can you talk a little bit about the reed lots, just to help people understand?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Newfoundland itself was his own little nation. Really, it was it was a prodigy of England. It was over here. It was a stepping stone to get to the New World. I mean, I'm always proud to talk about, you know, how many people in North America were really, you know, stones skipped across the water and, you know, processed through Newfoundland. And so, you know, at the time the England really understood the true resources of the province for its mineral rights and its forest and timber rights. And, you know, these different towns that were settled and I'll just go with, I might misquote some of the numbers, but the town of Grand Falls was on Reed Lot 59, and Buckins might have been 233 or 235. I'm not sure, but those properties were owned as in their entirety. They were owned by these people from the core of the earth to outer space, every aspect of it, from the mineral, the water, the forestry. They were like countries within the country. So they had total sovereign control really over these things and the properties. And to this day, the government is still trying to unwind it. You know, when the government took back Grand Falls, they say they made a mistake. No, they didn't. They couldn't do it any other way. You can't even untangle it. You talk about string theory, entanglement. I mean, it's almost impossible. But the government, you know, and the land, these people, they had true control over that land and property. And as they saw fit, you know, they could develop it for whatever purpose they chose. And therefore, you know, what was known to be of interest, like everything, things go through cycles. So in a state, a water resource was important and making a power for development of these other resources, you know? So that's why it was important. So these things did not get looked at.
So, but the reed lots were initially assigned because of the railroad that was going across?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a compensation
Yeah.
for that. And then, so they acquired large tracts of property right across the island. I mean, this railway went through in the late 1800s. And, it's, when you think about it, it was a crime that it's gone, really. But, what a feat of engineering. And if you look at the scale relatively to the cost of it in that time, what it would cost to do it again today. I mean, I don't know if you could ever do it again today. I don't think you can ever see another railway built, period. So, the exchange was heavy in terms of land, but Newfoundland had lots of it. And they're hoping, of course, that these people would use other monies to help develop other resources that would have been on it. That was a smart move, but it
tied things up, right? Like
it tied it up.
And the mineral rights were with the reed lots. So once that was unwound, for lack of better words, that's when you really started to open up those lots of land for mineral exploration. Correct. Okay.
So is that in the combination of knowledge, So as the knowledge era came to be, you get. I like the word paradigm shift, right? Because you see these things in shifts in general, right? So things shifted again, so it came open, the knowledge and data was available. The world we're looking for different things. So then you can go raise money and go explore. And that's what's important. If you don't have someone like an Eric Sprott there last week make the statement that he made, that he thinks that this could be, the biggest gold discovery in the world, and so that wakes up people, that enables other companies to be able to go to the market and say, if it's good enough for Eric, it's good enough for me, So, so then the money comes in, and then you can go out and you can go put that to work and find things, right? So,
the jurisdiction is just so rich in resources, like you say, from water to timber to mineral resources. Eric Sprott's story in I think it was in the Financial Post. Getting a lot of attention, I think, coming on the jurisdiction. You made reference to Newfound and the discovery there.
Yeah.
And
so when this whole process went through and the market goes up and down, and even originally when we did the deal with Rubicon back then, gold was we had some producing mines in Newfoundland, Hammerdown and Bullion, and they would produce gold at less than $250 an ounce and made money. So it was very efficient, small scale mining, but nonetheless, they did it. So when we did the deal with Rubicon, the concept was, well, there's no money in it. We can't give you a net smelter, really. That was sort of the angle that not Garfield, but other people in the company were taking. Of course, they were trying to develop Red Lake. But, we negotiated a sliding net smelter scale. I think it's probably one of the first ones ever negotiated. Mm-hmm. And it was based on, okay, fine. So gold's $250. You can't afford to pay us a net smelter. But if it goes over 300, it's this. If it goes over 350, it's that. So that investment by Rubicon then, put a lot more knowledge and understanding, and for people to go research, and to try to understand better what was out there. So it went through the cycle. The market collapsed in 2008, and they had good results, but not the spectacular results to drive it. Nor anyone, well, I can't say that Garfield never had the understanding of it all, because he did. For him, talk about and stuff, like his understanding was there from day one, and he truly understood that you're going to need a shitload of money to drill this properly in order to chase this thing down the rabbit hole. And so the whole market went backwards. And in 2016, my role in this gets to sound like this. A friend of mine who reached out to these guys and made a phone call to him, Bill Kennedy. Bill wasn't fully in the understanding of all the other sides of the business, but he's brass enough that he made the call, right? So when he had the tiger by the tail, it got handed over to me. And so then it was my job to market it, and the idea concept guy. And so that's what I did. And when they came here, I picked Denny and Colin up in the airport in 2016.
There with Newfound.
Yeah. So, they weren't Newfound then. They were just a concept, right? So they were just some guys that were going to start some company that, we're going to go out there and consolidate. Heard about the gold out there and stuff from previous reports from the gentleman's name coming in a minute, but so they were interested in it, and we had lots of other good results in H band, and a boulder north of that was I don't know the number now, was over 800 grams, 900 grams. So the big picture was there. So I explained to them the opportunity, and they came and we showed them a whole litany of properties that were historic in nature and known, but yet you get to see boots on the ground and the research data to go with it, to hand it to them, to explain where they were in space, and here are some of the the results, and then to paint the big picture, and that's what I did at the time. I told these guys, look, it's here, and here it is, and so they wanted to meet the Keatses, of course. So I arranged for that meeting, and they went and met with Alan and Kevin, and they took them in and showed them their discovery, showing, I guess, somewhere, I think it might have been the Lotto, and they came back truly impressed by the amount of gold they had seen, and never quite saw anything like that, and truly had a imaginative view of what could be, and for myself, I spun, of course, the big picture to say, look, the Dog Bay line is over here, the Dover Fault is over here, the other occurrences that were there, Gander Lake and the like, and along the strike, and right on up to Valentine Lake. And I said, this thing in Gander Lake itself is a big sigmoidal structure. It's stacked above itself to the north. We really sized it up, you'll see it. And some of the main trends now, by the way, that they're looking at over these hinge zones and stuff, that to my mind, I may be wrong, but that's just one limb of that sigmoidal on Gander Lake. And it's stacked above and it's stacked below. So when you get down through that and just try to picture this geology come together like an accordion, and then bring it up against the Mount Peyton and the deformation, that was involved, and some of the things that are happening along it. Because I had done this already with a company called VVC when Rubicon had come in originally, and we did all the stuff and staked around. Of course, then I introduced them to other people. Well, I mean, you had to know them anyway. I didn't invent those people. They deserved their kick at the can from where I was concerned. So, and then of course you met a lot more opportunity, and I was sort of set back for obvious reasons, to try to fend for myself. And I brought in a company called VVC, and we staked all that property now that Newfound has. I had that staked with VVC in that same concept and big picture. And at the time we went at it, and we were actually drilling Appleton, and we drilled through some pretty wild, we drilled pure MMI targets and hitting all of them. So that told me two things: either MMI worked or you couldn't miss. And it's probably more the latter.
So you have a role, you have a place in the history of what is looking like one of the greatest discoveries in Canadian history.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a hair in the back of the neck moment,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I saw Denny and Colin in the summer there when you had the fundraising dinner there in Gander. I was there with a gentleman that is an associate of Eric Sprott, and while I was there, of course, Denny saw me first and came over and really, said, "Wow, Gary, could you ever imagine that this is where this would go?" And then Colin also came over after that, and said, "Think, we're down to the Jag and with this concept and idea, talking about all this, and then out in the field, and look at where we're doing now." I mean, they raised in that little dinner meeting, I think they raised $56 or $58 million for the sake of 5 million chairs. And the bus is still going yet, So it's amazing, that the role you'd had to play in some of these things, and
launching. Like how many companies are there now around across the Newfoundland and extending into Labrador? It's the spin-offs and the benefits are incredible. And I think the new discoveries that we're going to see from all of this in places that haven't had it before. So last question for you.
Yeah.
If you weren't a prospector, what would you do?
Well, I mean, if you could go back and change a lot of things, I guess I'd go back further and probably really would have pushed something in engineering, And I'm the type of fellow got a lot of inventions in my head, and I probably would have tried to pursue them and develop them more so than what I did. And but you get to live vicariously through your kids, so they'll, I'm sure, follow in some of the things that I'll do. And there's a lot of other people that can do it. So yeah, I would have did something else in engineering, I think, if I could have went back and did it all again. It's almost outside of geology. I would always do this more of as a partial thing than 100%. There's some people I met through all this, and they put some wisdom on you,
Yeah.
So it's a very consuming business.
And there's lean years, right?
And oh yeah, there's definitely lean years, and for me, I could subsidize my income with other things. Well, other families here, you take about the Keatses, and you got people like the Quinlans too, like unbelievable prospectors, right? That their world scale, in terms of their abilities, right? And there's other people out there too that are at this, that are been hammering away. Tim Froud comes to mind. Peter Demo, but there's but inside the government too, there's so many contributing people inside the government that were just doing it. The same thing. They were setting seeds,
Yeah.
So there was so much of that, and for me, it's all a great bit of fun. So you think, okay, Labrador, we're going to do something real on a scale of Hibernia.
Yeah.
And that's what I told Ray at the time. Get off topic again for a second.
That's okay. That's okay.
I said to Ray, and when Aubrey, I said, look, we are with rare earth metals and uranium too, but rare earth metals where oil was in 1900. But it's not going to take us 100 years to get to where oil is today. I said, we'll do this quick. It's coming. And I said, it might take, 10 or 15 years. So, that was 2008 and 2010. So here we are now, some 10 years later.
An overnight, 10 years to an overnight success.
Nothing to it. And relatively speaking, it's not even that. It's like not even a blink, but the things are changing so quick. Yeah. Like in 1900, there was a paradigm shift. People went from wind and coal-fired and steam generation to the engine to the combustion engine. And then oil took that part. And so then oil became a petrochemical company. It became plastics. It became all these other things. We're not even seeing that with the rare earth metals yet. We're not even seeing what those unique properties will do for those metals, in terms of what they can do with things even like medicine. We're not even there yet. So I've always sat outside the box and tried to think ahead of the curve. And, I got a few arrows in my quiver yet, that will execute,
I believe you. Well, Gary, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
This conversation didn't go where expected, as usual. I said that last time, and but I really enjoyed it, and I think you've given everybody a lot of good background information on where we find ourselves today, and also what the opportunities are really like. And there's still so much untapped in the jurisdiction.
It's always about, I'll just go to a different little bit philosophical or whatever, but it's about knowledge, and where we're going with AI and understanding AI. And in that case, the government really needs to get ahead of the curve and really compile and put all their data in a format that can communicate with itself. And so when it's being compiled, it'll become truly part of a whole. And so then as they bring that into AI, and government should be doing it, and government should be mentoring, not letting a Charlie Gower, you can put it in a report, but my God, for the kids in university that could have been studying with them, someone should fund it,
And just for the benefit, Charlie worked for the government.
Charlie worked for the government, and he did a lot of work in Labrador. And, that's another place that we're, I'm very interested in. And just, in central Newfoundland, like Dave Evans, for instance, the role that Dave Evans has played, he's no longer with the government either. And, so he's gone on, and Dave helped us immensely. And when you look at someone now like Hamish, we had a little meeting the other day with Hamish. What a talent.
Very, very.
I'm just sitting back watching him saying, man, when that fellow really puts this all together, like he's helping a lot of people, I'm sure. But when he really puts this all together now, it's going to be pretty interesting. And he also knows rare earths, big time.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for today, Gary. And I really enjoyed myself. And I also want to thank everybody for tuning in and learning more and meeting Gary. And please join us again at Kissing the Cod. Oh, wait. Show Gary my cod. I'm going to pack him with me. We'll go fishing this summer.
Well, yeah, like you say, there's a beautiful little pub in Pellizone. I can show you the most gorgeous massive sulfide there that we trenched a couple of years ago. Combined metals over 53%. But the brewery is beautiful, and the tomahawk steak is enough for two. So, yep.
Nice. Well,
and then you go fishing.
I'm married to a prospector, and a weekend in the mountains is not at a ski resort. It's probably going over the mountain on a 4x4.
Yeah. Well, get Bill out here too, and let's get it on, as we say.
I will. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, I hope you come back and meet some more really interesting people. You can follow us on social media at Kissing the Cod. We're on Twitter and Instagram and also on Facebook. But thank you again, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Janet, very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.